what was the problem that you were facing before we started coaching?
General lack of health, I think, in terms of my mental and physical. Busy lifestyle, difficult to manage all the spinning plates. And so my natural tendency is to manage that through eating. And then I get in a sort of negative spiral of eating more and more and then not caring so much. So I think the biggest issue for me was getting back into the right mindset to start looking after myself.
One is, how is it affecting your life?
The biggest sort of manifestation of that was I become quite insular, in terms of anxiety. You're sort of big, you're not wearing nice clothes, you're stuck in a bit of a rut. Mentally, you're in a bit of a downward spin. I naturally become a little bit more insular, hide myself away a little bit, don't go out so often, feel anxious when I'm out and about in public spaces. So largely it was sort of a general sense of anxiety.
What stopped you solving the problem yourself?
I think it's really a case of having the standard words that you think about in terms of accountability and having someone to be there as a support network. For me, it was really a case of forcing my way back into a sort of right mental space by having something definitive in a diary, to have something structured, rather than trying to sort of manage a process on my own where I would be trying to find my way back into it. And I have managed that in the past, but it takes a lot of mental strain. And I have a busy lifestyle. I have, relatively difficult job, no relaxation time at home with the three kids and managing that. And so really it's a subcontracting out the mental space of having someone to be able to really help me get there. And that's purely because when you're looking at something yourself, you only look at it from your perspective. And you get the confirmation bias problem of I'm looking at this, I've solved it this way, it must be right. And having that second pair of eyes to be able to manage that process through and say, actually, have you thought about it in this way? Have you dealt with this? And covering all the bases. It's an extension to what we're saying in terms of like offloading the mental load of trying to manage that process. It's really a case of it becoming collaborative and covering all the angles.
When it comes to you doing it for your own food and training and stuff, there you just said it there, it becomes a much more of like emotional thing as well, because we have this like relationship with food and we have these like emotion. You've got to regulate your own emotions within that process yourself, and it is a lot to put on one person to deal with everything yourself, especially. And then we don't go down the realms of, are they, do you know the right stuff or the scientific approach?
I like to look at the information out there. I like to be informed about what I'm doing. But there's plenty of YouTube channels, YouTube shorts, people trying to shill whatever they're shilling with plenty of different advice, intermittent fasting, calorie counting. There's so much noise out there. Everyone with their own vested interest in what they're telling you. Um, and so you start thinking, well, I should do it this way, I should do it that way. And really just having one defined approach towards it, which is actually taking a step back and taking a quite simplistic approach to it, um, has been really helpful for me, I think.
So what was different about what you've done before and then what we did this time around?
So, as I told you at the outset, I'm a big swing yo-yo kind of person. I've been fit in the past, and I've been incredibly big in the past. Those things, those elements of me happen in these phases where I am incredibly disciplined and I can do things in a very regimented way, or I can not give a shit and do nothing at all. Um, Now, what I've done differently this time is taken a more measured approach to it, a long-term approach to it, to get comfortable in myself again. But the most significant part for me, and the thing I wanted to do differently this time, is that when I've lost weight in the past, I've felt weak at the back end of that process. I felt like I've lost a lot of body mass, but I haven't made myself healthier. And I really wanted to get into the beginnings of the process where I would drop the weight, but feel strong and comfortable in my body, to the point where I knew that once I got back to the place that I have been to in the past that I could continue that process rather than feeling effectively I got to the end of the road and I'm at some plateau and I can't do it. And it's historically been those points where I hit some plateau, I'm feeling weak, then some external thing comes in where, I've got problems at work, something coming up. Um, I'm busy at the weekend, and all of a sudden I'll get into a phase of effort, right? I'll deal with that problem afterwards and I'll deal with the other problems first. And then before you know it, 6 months have passed, and all of a sudden you're back at square one. Then you get the beating yourself up problem. Why did I do it? And that channels back in, it feeds back into the anxiety problem. So really, what have I done differently? I'm trying to break the process of the ups and downs and trying to make it a little bit more of a linear process.
When did you know the coaching was working?
Almost immediately, to be honest, because I knew that my mindset had flipped. When I phoned you, I would say I was at the, pretty deep ebb in terms of my mental space. And I do this thing where, it will take me a couple of months of being in a real pit to then start, like, in those 2 months, I'm thinking I'm almost, sounds crass, but it's almost like an addict problem, in the sense that, when you hear people talking about, alcoholics where they hit their rock bottom. And I think that is a similar mental process to me. I have to hit, almost really bury myself into a rock bottom position. And once I get there, then my mind flips again. So when I phoned you, I think that was the manifestation of the flip. But realistically, the first time we did the exercise and it felt like I was actively doing something towards it, and actually creating a mental pathway of what that looks like going forward 3, 6, 12 months later, it gave me the focus to carry on doing it, right? So straight away in terms of the physical activity, but also the mental switch straight away of just being in that process.
What was the best thing about the coaching?
I think you're really easy to speak to. There's a lack of judgment, which really helps me because when you're judging yourself real hard, to not feel that judgment externally really counts for something. So I felt like there was an instant trust there where I could be pretty open and honest about who I am and what I want to do. So personality is probably the most significant one. And second to that, I feel like your judgment is very good in terms of what we're physically doing in the sessions. Like your questions at the end, and I appreciate it's a standard question of, what number, what difficulty. Those are honest answers when I say they're 7 and 8s, because I think you've pitched it right, which I think is testament to, what you're doing. Yeah, and so far it's working, right? You start to feel muscle growth, and the scales are telling the stories. The scales are coming down. I looked at my sleep thing honestly, over the last 5 years with the twins being so young. My average sleep per night is like 4.5, 5 hours a night. And I think that actually plays a lot in my sort of mental cycles, because it's that exhaustion when you're chasing the energy that actually starts the sort of negative spiral. So it's almost like you've had a few drinks though, in terms of the willpower drop when you are sleep deprived.
Mm.
And you hear about it in terms of like torture techniques, don't you? Like sleep deprivation and how they break people down. But my willpower, my fortitude in terms of my diet, if the sleep does become that bad, it's next to nothing.
Yeah.
You're like, right, I'm getting something greasy. It's like a hangover thing, isn't it? Like
Yeah.
you naturally crave that high, the stodgy, the high calorie density stuff, the greasy stuff.
How has your life changed as a result of what we've been doing?
I'm starting to come out of my shell a bit again, which is nice. Starting to feel like me is coming out.
Good.
I still feel like I'm in a bit of a holding pattern. I'm not quite there. You know, the biggest problem I have, and we have talked about this in sessions, is I think I've been married to the scales for a long time. At a certain weight, I feel like you just get that general anxiety, like, well, I'm a bit of a mess of a human being. How can people, especially with like client stuff, like to think that I'm good at my job, but you naturally feel like you're talking rubbish because you're not in control of your own life. Do you know what I mean? How can I give advice to other people when I can't advise myself? So that's starting to come back. I'm starting to feel my a bit more self-confidence. I'm feeling optimistic, which is always a good sign. I'm optimistic for where I'm going to be in a few months. Making plans, even booking time away with my wife. So yeah, I mean, we're getting there.
Good. Absolutely.
Yeah, and tying back to that question you asked earlier on, what has helped in terms of the PT and what have you done well? That is having you there as a support network to a large extent helps me to break myself away from those dependencies in terms of, where am I at? Instead of looking at it in the immediate term, which is what I would always do, coming back to that optimism thing, I'm looking to where I can be. And that's largely because of, entering into this process.
What's different about the person you are now to who you were when we started?
Still the same bag of mess, but a better bag of mess. Uh, Slowly getting myself in order. So I think that's about it.
What would have to happen for you to go back to who you were before we started? So,
So when the stars align and I get, let's just say it often happens when there's a big project at work, then one of the kids gets sick and I have to like miss, like you got to go and pick up the kids early from school and you should be working, but you're not. And then you get pressure from, say, my wife's, she needs a break. And then you got to take on some more responsibility at the weekend. A cumulative effect of like, what am I doing? When you're trying to fit the square peg in the round hole of life.
yeah.
And then that I can do that for a short period of time. And then fatigue sets in where I'm desperate to sort of break away from it. I need a break. Um, that's generally when I find myself like tending towards the binge. So that is a cycle that I need to cover off when it comes because it will come
Mhm.
and it will be something that I have to sort of ride through and keep the faith. Uh, but I think natural protection against that will be this time round, I will be already fitter and stronger than I have been in the past when I've been dieting. So instead of the diet causing more fatigue on top, I think the hopefully the natural health that I'll have from where we're at will actually keep my energy levels high. I think mentally it's probably going to help rather than hinder. But yeah, I mean, so the approach has been good. I said this to you before, but I'm really interested to see what happens when we get down to, what I'm calling the magic number of the about 100 kilos, when historically I've hit plateaus and I've
Yeah.
not been able to break them. So that might require much more effort. It might require small tweaks. I don't know the answer to that yet.